widowed cowboy met an Apache woman and her children in the storm. Her identity changed it all. John Walker rode slowly across the wide, empty plains, the hooves of his horse sinking slightly into the soft, damp earth. The air was heavy, and a distant rumble of thunder warned that a storm was on its way. He had lived on this land for nearly a decade, ever since the tragic death of his wife. 3 years had passed, yet the loneliness still pressed on him like the weight of the low-hanging clouds above. His life had become a routine of tending to cattle, mending fences, and traveling the dusty trails that stretched endlessly around his small homestead. The land was beautiful, but the isolation made the sunsets feel more like reminders of emptiness than moments of peace. As he guided his horse along the familiar trail, John noticed the sky darkening faster than usual. The clouds had gathered quickly, thick and gray, and the wind began to pick up. There was a tension in the air that he couldn't quite explain, a restlessness that made him glance around more cautiously. John had spent years on the plains. He had ridden through many storms, but something about this one felt different. It carried a sense of urgency, almost as if the land itself was warning him of something to come. He urged his horse forward, scanning the horizon with a practiced eye. That was when he saw them, a woman and 2 children struggling through the rain, their forms hunched against the wind. They were soaked, mud splattered up their legs, and they moved slowly, clearly exhausted from whatever had brought them this far. John's heart tightened. He had faced dangerous storms before, but he had never seen people caught in one so vulnerable and alone. Instinctively, he kicked his horse into a faster pace, moving toward them despite the growing squall. The closer he got, the clearer it became that they were in real danger. The wind had become stronger, whipping through the grass and sending debris scattering across the ground. The children clung to the woman's hands, and she struggled to keep them upright, her head down, shielding them as best she could. John's horse slid slightly in the mud, but he held firm, reaching the family just as the first heavy drops of rain fell. "Come on, quick! You'll get sick out here," John called, his voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. The woman looked up briefly, her face streaked with rain and dirt. Her dark eyes, though wary, showed a flicker of relief. Without hesitation, she nodded, ushering the children forward as John guided them toward the safety of his cabin, which lay just a mile off the trail. He had always kept it sturdy, built to withstand the harshest weather, and tonight it would serve as a sanctuary. Inside the small cabin, John moved quickly. He helped them remove their soaked clothes and lit the fireplace, the warm glow pushing back the chill that had seeped into their bones. The woman wrapped her children in blankets while John fetched dry clothing and towels. The children, scared at first, clung to their mother. But as the warmth of the fire reached them, they began to relax, glancing curiously at the man who had saved them. "My name is John," he said quietly, trying not to startle them. "You're safe now," the woman nodded, introducing herself as Morning Star. Her voice was soft but firm, carrying a quiet strength that John immediately noticed. She did not explain much, only that they had been traveling for some time, fleeing circumstances she could not yet share. John didn't press her. He had learned long ago that trust could not be rushed, and that sometimes people carried burdens too heavy to speak of immediately. As the storm raged outside, John busied himself preparing a simple meal. The children hovered close to the fire, peeking at the flames as if hypnotized by the flickering light. Morning Star worked quietly, helping where she could, her movements careful but efficient. John watched her with a growing sense of admiration. There was something about her presence, something resilient, unyielding, and yet gentle, that intrigued him. He had lived alone for so long that even simple conversation felt novel, and her quiet courage stirred feelings he had thought long buried. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and shaking the cabin walls, but inside there was a strange warmth. The fire crackled, and the children's occasional giggles broke the silence in small, comforting ways. John found himself telling them stories of the plains, of the cattle he had tended, and of the small town beyond the hills. He spoke slowly, carefully, mindful of the children's ears, but also aware that Morning Star was listening. She nodded at intervals, her eyes thoughtful, and John could see the way she measured his words, the way she considered them before responding. Night deepened, and the storm showed no sign of relenting. Rain pelted the roof, wind tore through the open spaces, and the distant rumble of thunder became constant. Yet in the cabin, there was a fragile sense of safety. Morningstar sat with her children, brushing their damp hair and murmuring quiet reassurances. John kept the fire going, occasionally checking the cabin walls and windows for leaks, but mostly he watched them. He could feel a connection forming. Not instant, not overwhelming, but steady, like the first slow pulse of a heartbeat after a long period of stillness. By the time the storm began to ease, the cabin smelled of wet earth and smoke, of wood and warmth. The children had fallen asleep, exhausted, and Morningstar finally allowed herself to sit back, her eyes heavy but alert. She looked at John, and in that moment something passed between them. There was trust, not complete, not yet, but enough to know that he had helped them when no one else could. John felt the same. He had expected loneliness to greet him again, to sit with him like a shadow in the firelight. Instead, there was a spark of something new. The woman and her children had entered his life like the storm itself, sudden, powerful, and impossible to ignore. He knew this night would be remembered, not just for the storm, but for the way it had brought them together. Morningstar finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "Thank you," she said simply. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment John saw a glimpse of the life she had carried with her. Hardship, fear, and a determination to survive. He nodded, unsure of what to say in response. Words felt inadequate. The rest of the night passed in calm, punctuated only by the occasional gust of wind and the soft breathing of the children. John kept watch by the fire for a while, reflecting on how quickly life could change. He had thought he would spend another night alone, staring at the empty walls of his cabin, but instead he had found unexpected company, fragile yet powerful. As dawn approached, the storm finally gave way to a pale gray light. Rain still dripped from the eaves and the air smelled fresh and clean. John stepped outside briefly, breathing in the new day. He knew the storm had passed, but something deeper had begun. A connection, a sense of responsibility, and perhaps, in time, a chance for healing. When he returned to the cabin, Morningstar was awake, tending to the children as they slowly stirred. She looked up at him and they exchanged a small, understanding smile. No words were needed. The night had spoken for them. John Walker, the widowed cowboy, had thought he knew the plains, its dangers, and its solitude. But the storm had shown him that life could still surprise him. In the form of a woman and her children, it had brought a challenge, a responsibility, and a quiet promise that perhaps he was not meant to face the future alone after all. And so, the day began. Muddy, wet, and uncertain, but with the first fragile stirrings of hope. John knew that this encounter was only the beginning, that the storm had brought more than rain and wind. It had brought change, and with it the possibility of something he had long thought impossible. A family again. The morning after the storm was calm, yet the air still carried the scent of wet earth and fresh rain. The plains seemed quieter than usual, the soft drip of water from leaves and roof eaves the only sound. John Walker woke early, as he always did, and stepped outside to check the weather. The sky was a soft gray, with streaks of sunlight beginning to pierce the clouds. His horse grazed nearby, still damp from the rain, and the land seemed to exhale after the night's chaos. Inside the cabin, Morningstar moved quietly, tending to her children, who were just beginning to wake. They were pale but unharmed, and John felt a sense of relief that the storm had not taken them from him or her. He noticed the care in her movements, the way she brushed back their damp hair, made sure their blankets were snug, and whispered small reassurances. Even though she had arrived in fear and uncertainty, she seemed determined to bring normalcy to her children's lives. John stepped in to help, fetching water and preparing a simple breakfast of bread and porridge. The children eyed him curiously, their shyness from the previous night replaced by cautious curiosity. Morningstar allowed John to serve them, silently acknowledging his help with a small nod. She did not speak much, but her calm presence filled the room, creating an atmosphere of quiet stability that John had not realized he missed so deeply. Over the course of the day, John began to notice just how capable Morningstar was. She knew the land in ways that impressed him. She could find small hidden water sources, identify edible plants, and even track the movements of animals across the plains. He watched as she guided the children in collecting kindling for the fire, showing them how to move quietly without startling birds and rabbits. Her skills were not just practical. They carried a quiet confidence that made John realize she had survived hardships he could only imagine. The children, initially shy, began to respond to her guidance. They laughed softly when she demonstrated how to pick up small twigs without breaking them, and they copied her careful movements when gathering firewood. John watched the scene unfold, feeling a warmth he had not experienced in years. It was not the warmth of romance, nor even friendship. It was the warmth of shared purpose, of people finding their place in each other's lives. Despite the calm of the day, there was an unspoken tension. Morningstar seemed to carry invisible burdens, the weight of her past evident in her cautious glances toward the horizon. John sensed that she was always listening, always aware, as if expecting danger at any moment. He wanted to ask, to understand her story fully, but he also knew that trust could not be forced. He respected her silence, understanding that survival often required discretion. As the morning turned into afternoon, John decided to take the children to the pasture. He mounted his horse and Morningstar followed on foot, guiding the children as they walked through the wet grass. The children laughed more freely now, their fear from the storm fading with every step. John explained the routines of the ranch, showing them the fences, the grazing cattle, and the water troughs. Morningstar listened carefully, asking questions here and there, her curiosity restrained but clear. The bond between the adults grew subtly during these hours. There was an unspoken understanding that had begun to form, a respect forged not in words but in shared responsibility. John had faced many challenges on the plains, but he realized that Morningstar's resilience complemented his own experience. Together, they managed tasks with a silent efficiency, a rhythm that made life feel surprisingly easy despite the hardships they had faced individually. As evening approached, the wind picked up slightly, a reminder that the plains were never truly calm. John prepared another fire while Morningstar settled the children into bed. She whispered stories in their language, stories of courage, family, and survival. Though he could not understand every word, John sensed their significance, the careful way she imparted lessons to her children. The children listened intently, their eyes wide, their small hands gripping the blankets as they absorbed every word. Later, after the children had fallen asleep, John and Morningstar sat near the fire, the room quiet except for the occasional crackle of flames. John broke the silence first. "You're strong," he said simply. "I've never met anyone like you." Morningstar's eyes met his, and for a moment she did not answer. Then she spoke softly. "Life teaches you strength in ways you never expect." Her voice carried no complaint, only the quiet truth of experience. John felt a deeper respect for her. He had known hardship himself, but hers seemed different, more complex, filled with responsibility not just for herself, but for her children and her family's past. Over the next several days, a routine developed. John worked the cattle in the morning while Morningstar prepared meals and taught the children small tasks. She showed them how to tend the garden, care for small animals, and respect the land they walked on. John would occasionally ride alongside her, discussing strategies for the ranch or sharing stories of the town beyond the plains. The more he observed her, the more he realized how rare her combination of intelligence, skill, and quiet courage was. Despite the routine, John noticed subtle signs of tension in Morningstar. She often stared at the horizon, listening for sounds he could not hear. Occasionally, she would pause mid-task, her body tense, as if recalling something from the past. John wanted to ask, but he waited, understanding that some things could not be rushed. Trust, he knew, was earned slowly, and forcing it could destroy the fragile bond they were beginning to form. One afternoon, a deer appeared near the edge of the pasture. The children squealed in delight, and Morningstar's eyes lit up. She demonstrated how to approach quietly, how to observe without alarming the animal. John watched, impressed by her knowledge and the patience she displayed with the children. It was not just skill. It was teaching, guiding, and protecting all at once. He realized then that her presence had transformed the ranch. Life felt fuller, richer, and even the hardships seemed lighter when shared. As the week passed, John noticed that the children had grown more comfortable with him. They laughed freely, asked questions, and even sought his guidance in small tasks. Morningstar seemed to recognize this change, watching him with a quiet acknowledgement that he had become a part of their lives, not just a temporary protector. The bonds between them strengthened subtly, like the roots of a tree growing slowly beneath the surface. Evenings were the most telling moments. After the children were asleep, John and Morningstar would sit by the fire, sharing stories or simply observing the flames. There were moments of silence, comfortable and unforced, where no words were necessary. In those moments, John felt a sense of companionship he had not known since before his wife died. Morningstar, too, seemed to relax slightly, her eyes softening, her body easing from the constant tension of vigilance. One night, as the wind whispered outside, John spoke quietly. "You've done a lot for these children already. They trust you, and so do I." Morningstar looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, a simple gesture, but one filled with meaning. She did not speak immediately, but her eyes held a mixture of gratitude and understanding. That night, John realized that the storm had brought more than just strangers to his door. It had brought potential, hope, and the beginnings of family. Over time, John and Morningstar began to share more of their pasts, slowly and carefully. She told him fragments of the life she had led, the dangers she had faced, and the responsibilities she carried as a mother. John shared stories of his wife, his life before the plains, and the lessons he had learned from solitude. Their conversations were cautious, respectful, and honest, creating a foundation of trust that felt solid and enduring. By the end of the week, the small cabin felt like a home in a way it never had before. The storm had left behind more than puddles and mud. It had left a sense of connection, a fragile yet growing hope that life could still bring joy and companionship. The children had smiles on their faces, the cabin was warm, and even the plains, with all their wildness, seemed a little less lonely. John knew, as he watched Morningstar teach the children to care for the garden, that life was shifting. The storm had changed everything. He had begun the week as a solitary man, mourning a past he could not reclaim. Now he found himself sharing his world with people who mattered, people who brought light, laughter, and purpose to each day. He understood that their presence was not temporary. Morningstar and her children had become part of the rhythm of the ranch, woven into its daily life like threads in a tapestry. And though the future was uncertain, John felt a renewed sense of hope. The plains had tested him with storms, with loneliness, and with the weight of loss. But now, he felt ready to face whatever came next, not alone, but with a new family by his side. The first part of their journey together had ended with a storm. The next part, John realized, would begin with trust, courage, and the slow unfolding of lives intertwining in ways neither of them could have predicted. And as he looked at Morningstar guiding her children in the early morning light, he felt a quiet certainty. The storm had been only the beginning. The days on the ranch settled into a rhythm, each morning bringing new chores and small victories. John Walker rose with the sun, the golden light spilling across the plains, painting the grass with warmth and color. The cattle were calm, grazing lazily after the storm had refreshed the earth. Morningstar moved among them with ease, her children following close, learning quickly how to carry water, feed the animals, and mend fences. The ranch had always been his home, but now it felt different. It felt alive with the energy of new lives, small laughter, and quiet companionship. John found himself watching Morningstar more often than he expected. Her movements were precise and deliberate, yet there was a gentle kindness in everything she did. She never rushed, but she never wasted time either. The children adored her, and he could see why. She had a way of explaining even the simplest task, as if it carried meaning. When she taught the children to care for the chickens, She told them stories of how each bird was part of a larger cycle of life. When she showed them how to plant seeds, she spoke softly about patience, nurturing, and growth. John could see the care she poured into every lesson, and he felt a quiet admiration for her. The children had begun to settle into a new kind of happiness. Their laughter echoed across the ranch, a sound John had missed more than he realized. They asked questions constantly, curious about the land, the animals, and John's stories of the town beyond the hills. Morning Star answered with patience, correcting mistakes gently and praising their efforts. Even the shyest moments of the past seemed to fade as the children grew confident under her guidance. Despite the peaceful rhythm, there were moments of tension. Morning Star's eyes often scanned the horizon as if expecting someone, or something, to appear. John noticed this, though he never asked her directly. He knew she carried burdens she had yet to share, responsibilities that shaped every choice she made. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, her expression would harden slightly, her posture tense, as if she were preparing for an unseen threat. John understood that her caution was not distrust, it was survival. She had learned to protect herself and her children long before she had arrived at his ranch, and he respected that deeply. One afternoon, John decided to take the children on a ride around the property. The sun was warm, the sky a bright blue, and the earth smelled of fresh rain. Morning Star walked beside them, holding one child's hand while the other rode with John. The children were delighted, laughing as their small horse hooves splashed through puddles and ran alongside the trails. John felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. It was a simple joy yet profound to see the children happy and safe. During the ride, John and Morning Star talked quietly. He asked her about the land, about her life before she came to the ranch. She answered in fragments, careful to reveal only what she chose. "I've seen a lot," she said softly, her gaze distant. "More than most people should. I've had to make decisions I never wanted to make, and I've had to protect those I love above all else." Her words were quiet, yet they carried weight. John could feel the strength behind them, the resilience born from years of hardship. He shared his own story as well, though less openly. He spoke of his wife, of the life he had shared with her before tragedy struck. He did not dwell on his loss, but he spoke honestly, allowing Morning Star to understand the depth of his solitude. In return, she listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, her eyes thoughtful. There was a connection forming between them, one that did not need words to grow stronger. Evenings on the ranch became moments of reflection and calm. The children would fall asleep exhausted from the day's activities, and John and Morning Star would sit by the fire, talking quietly or simply enjoying the warmth. They discussed the challenges of raising children in such a remote place, the difficulties of surviving on the plains, and their shared hopes for safety and stability. The firelight highlighted the gentle lines of her face, and John realized he was drawn to her in ways he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Despite the comfort and growing trust, John could see that Morning Star remained cautious. She did not fully let down her guard, her past shaping her every action, but he respected that. He knew that trust had to be earned, and he was willing to wait. He understood that love and companionship were built slowly, through shared hardship and mutual respect, not through words alone. One day, a neighboring rancher stopped by. He greeted John politely but was visibly wary of Morning Star. His eyes lingered on her, and John could sense the unspoken questions in his gaze. The townspeople were not always kind to outsiders, especially those with different backgrounds. Morning Star remained calm, introducing herself courteously but keeping her distance. John noticed the tension but did not intervene unnecessarily. He trusted her to handle the situation, and she did so with quiet dignity. After the visitor left, John and Morning Star walked along the edge of the property, the children playing nearby. "People will judge," John said softly. "They don't understand who you are or where you've been, but that doesn't matter. What matters is what we do here and how we care for these children." She nodded, a small smile breaking through her usual seriousness. It was brief, but it warmed John's heart. The days continued like this, a balance of work, learning, and quiet companionship. Morning Star proved invaluable to the ranch, her knowledge of the land, animals, and survival skills unmatched. She could predict weather changes, locate hidden water sources, and even calm the cattle when storms approached. John realized that her presence had transformed not only the children's lives but his own. The ranch felt fuller, safer, and more alive with her there. One evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, John noticed Morning Star sitting quietly, watching the children play near the fence. He approached her slowly, not wanting to startle her. "They're growing so fast," he said. "It's amazing how quickly they're learning." She nodded, her eyes soft.
"They are resilient," she replied. "Children are strong when they feel safe."
"And they will be safe here, with you and me." John felt a deep sense of gratitude. The storm that had brought them together now seemed like fate, a turning point that had changed everything. Morning Star's calm strength and quiet wisdom had become the anchor for his home, the glue holding them all together. He realized that life on the plains, which had once felt lonely and unending, now held the promise of connection and joy. Yet even in this peaceful routine, John could sense the undercurrent of uncertainty. He knew that the world beyond the ranch was not always kind, and that Morning Star's past, whatever it held, could catch up to them. He did not voice these fears, but he remained vigilant, watching the horizon, ready to protect the family that had begun to form under his roof. Over time, small moments revealed the depth of Morning Star's character. She would pause in the middle of a chore to notice a bird's nest, gently pointing it out to the children. She would teach them not just how to care for animals, but why they mattered, instilling a sense of respect and responsibility. John watched and learned from her example, realizing that survival alone was not enough. Life required compassion, patience, and understanding. As weeks turned into months, the bond between John and Morning Star grew stronger, though it remained unspoken in many ways. They understood each other through shared work, quiet gestures, and mutual respect. The children thrived under their care, happy and confident, laughing freely in the fields and learning from both their parents. Life on the ranch was not easy, but it was rich with purpose, connection, and the subtle joys of daily life. John found himself thinking more often about the future. He realized that he could no longer imagine the ranch without Morning Star and the children. They had become part of his life in ways he had never anticipated. He understood that the storm that had brought them together was only the beginning. Their journey would continue, filled with challenges, growth, and the slow unfolding of trust and love. Even in quiet moments, such as sitting on the porch at sunset or walking through the fields after chores, John felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. Morning Star was there beside him, her presence steady and reassuring. The children ran ahead, their laughter carried by the wind, and John, for the first time in a long time, allowed himself to believe that life could be full again, that the past did not define him, and that the future held possibilities beyond loneliness. The plains stretched out endlessly before them, wild and unpredictable, yet filled with promise. John understood that this life, with its work, its challenges, and its unexpected joys, was richer because of Morning Star and her children. He felt a quiet hope, the kind that grows slowly, rooted in the certainty of shared strength, trust, and the beginnings of a new family. And as the sun disappeared behind the distant hills, John Walker knew that the days ahead, no matter what storms they might bring, would be faced together. The ranch had become more than a home. It had become a place of connection, learning, and love. And for the first time in years, John felt ready to embrace whatever came next. Life on the ranch had settled into a steady rhythm, but John Walker could sense that change was approaching, though he did not know when or how. The children were thriving, running freely across the fields, laughing and learning under Morning Star's watchful guidance. The ranch itself was alive in a way it hadn't been in years, vibrant with the sound of life, work, and small joys. Yet beneath the surface of this peace, John could see hints of tension in Morning Star, subtle signs that her past had not been fully left behind. One bright morning, while the children were helping gather eggs and feed the chickens, a rider appeared on the horizon. John squinted against the sun, and felt a twinge of unease. The rider approached quickly, kicking up dust and carrying a sense of purpose in his stride. He wore a leather coat, and his eyes were sharp, scanning the ranch with the precision of someone who knew exactly what he wanted. John dismounted immediately, his hand resting near his holster, not because he expected trouble, but because instinct told him to be cautious. As the rider reached the cabin, he pulled back his coat slightly, revealing a badge of some sort and a folded document. "John Walker," he asked, his voice firm and direct. "I need to speak with the woman here." "The Apache woman. Morning Star. She needs to come with me." John felt a sudden tension grip him. "Who are you?" he demanded, stepping between the rider and the cabin. "And why should she go with you?" The rider's eyes were steady. "I know her history," he said. "I know who she is, and I am here to ensure she returns. It's a matter of responsibility and safety, for her and for her children." John's mind raced. Morning Star had always been cautious, always careful not to reveal too much about herself. He had sensed that she carried a secret, but he had not expected anyone to appear so suddenly, demanding her obedience. He turned to her, unsure what she would say or do. Morning Star's expression was calm but guarded. Her dark eyes met John's, and for a long moment she did not speak. The children, sensing the sudden tension, clung to her, their small hands gripping her skirts. She knelt to reassure them quietly, whispering words in her language, her voice steady but soft. John could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to protect her children. She wanted to stay on the ranch. But she knew that her past could not be ignored. Finally, she spoke. "John, he knows my story." "He knows who I really am," she said quietly. Her words were measured, careful, yet carried weight. John's heart tightened. He had hoped she would eventually trust him with the truth, but now it was coming in a way he had not expected. The rider stepped closer, holding out the document. "You need to come with me. There are dangers if you do not return. Your family, your heritage, requires it." John felt a surge of protectiveness. He placed a hand on Morning Star's shoulder, gently steadying her. "I don't know who you are or what this is about," he said to the rider, "but she's under my roof. You don't take her without explanation. You don't take her children either." Morning Star looked at John, gratitude and relief flashing across her face. She took a deep breath, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly as she realized he would stand by her. "I need to tell him the truth," she said softly. She turned to the rider. "I am not just a traveler," she began, her voice steady now. "I am the daughter of a respected Apache leader. My family has responsibilities, and there are dangers that come with that lineage. I had to leave to protect my children and myself. The life you know is not safe for us, not yet." The rider listened silently, his expression unchanged. John, however, felt a mix of shock and awe. He had known there was strength in Morning Star, resilience born of hardship, but he had not understood the depth of her responsibilities or the risks she had faced. She was not simply a mother seeking shelter. She was someone who carried the weight of a legacy, someone whose life had been shaped by duty, courage, and survival. The children clung to her skirts, eyes wide, sensing the importance of what was happening. John knelt beside them, offering a gentle reassurance. "You're safe," he said quietly. "No one will hurt you here." Morning Star nodded, then faced the rider again. "I am willing to work with you," she said, "but I will not leave my children behind. They are my responsibility first and foremost, and I will not go anywhere without John's support, for he has become part of our lives." There was a tense silence. The rider studied her, then slowly nodded. "I understand," he said. "But there are matters that must be resolved. You cannot remain here forever without addressing them." John could see that Morning Star's decision was deliberate, her courage unwavering. She had faced storms and dangers before, and now she faced the challenges of her past, knowing that the safety of her children depended on her choices. John admired her deeply. He realized that her identity, her lineage, her history, and her responsibilities was not a burden to fear, but a source of remarkable strength. Over the next several days, John and Morningstar worked together to prepare for what might come. She shared more of her story, carefully and selectively, revealing the responsibilities that had forced her to flee and the threats that still lingered. John listened, absorbing every detail, understanding not just her past but the courage it had taken to reach this point. He felt a growing admiration for her, recognizing the depth of her resilience and the wisdom behind her choices. The children continued their routines, blissfully unaware of the complexity of the adult decisions being made. They played in the fields, helped with chores, and laughed freely under the watchful eyes of John and Morningstar. Their innocence and joy provided a grounding presence for the adults, reminding them of what truly mattered. One afternoon, while tending the cattle, John asked Morningstar about her father and her family. She paused, her gaze distant. "They are strong, but so much has changed," she said. "I left to protect my children, to give them a chance at life that I cannot guarantee if I return unprepared. My identity is a part of me, but it is also something I must manage carefully." John nodded. He realized then that Morningstar's past, her identity and the responsibilities she carried were not just stories to be told. They were lived experiences that had shaped her entirely. And now, knowing the truth, he felt an even stronger connection to her, a desire to stand by her no matter what challenges lay ahead. As the sun set over the plains, the two of them sat quietly, watching the golden light fade into deep orange and purple. The wind rustled the grass, carrying a promise of change in the unknown future. John reached out, taking Morningstar's hand gently. She looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and trust in her eyes. In that simple gesture, a silent agreement was made. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. That night, John reflected on how the storm had brought them together. It had saved them from immediate danger, but it had also revealed the depth of who Morningstar truly was. Her identity, her past, and her courage had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of her children and John himself. He understood that this revelation would change everything, the way they lived, the way they faced challenges, and the way they would continue to grow as a family. In the quiet hours of the night, as the children slept peacefully, John and Morningstar talked softly about the future. They discussed strategies to protect the ranch, ensure the children's safety, and navigate the challenges that might arise from her past. There was no fear, only determination. They were partners now, united not just by circumstance, but by choice and trust. The revelation of Morningstar's identity had shifted the dynamic of their lives entirely. What had begun as a storm-driven encounter had blossomed into a relationship built on respect, shared responsibility, and courage. John knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that together they could face whatever challenges awaited them. By morning, the ranch felt different. There was a sense of purpose, of readiness, and of quiet pride. John watched the children run freely across the fields, their laughter mingling with the morning wind. Morningstar moved among them, confident, calm, and strong, a figure of resilience and grace. John realized that this revelation, the truth of her identity, had not made her distant or untouchable. Instead, it had made her more real, more admirable, and more essential to the life they were building together. As the sun rose fully, casting long shadows across the plains, John understood that the storm and the rider had brought clarity. They had revealed the true strength of Morningstar and the depth of her courage. And he knew, without doubt, that their journey together was only beginning, one that would be shaped by trust, love, and the unbreakable bond of family. The morning air was crisp and clear, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. John Walker stood at the edge of the ranch, watching the children play in the sun, their laughter ringing across the plains. Morningstar moved among them, steady and calm, guiding them gently while letting them explore and learn. The events of the past weeks, the storm, her arrival, the revelations, and the challenges had brought them closer than John could have imagined. Their lives were no longer solitary, no longer defined by loss and fear. Together, they had created something stronger, a family built on trust, respect, and courage. Morningstar approached John, her children running ahead to chase a butterfly across the field. She smiled softly, a mixture of relief and quiet pride in her eyes. "They are happy here," she said, her voice calm yet filled with meaning. "And I believe we can protect them. This ranch, this life."
It can be safe for us.
John nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The storm had brought them together, but it was her courage and determination that had allowed them to build a home. He had faced loneliness and grief for years, but now, with Morningstar and the children beside him, he realized he had found a sense of purpose and belonging he had thought lost forever. The days that followed were filled with work, learning, and quiet moments of connection. John and Morningstar worked side by side, repairing fences, tending the garden, and caring for the animals. They shared chores and responsibilities, their cooperation seamless and natural. The children thrived in this environment, learning from both of them, gaining skills, confidence, and a sense of security that had been absent from their lives for so long. Despite the peaceful routine, John remained aware that life outside the ranch could be unpredictable. He had learned to trust Morningstar's instincts, and she had proven time and again that she could navigate challenges with intelligence and care. Together, they planned for potential dangers, discussing ways to protect the ranch and the children, always keeping their safety as the top priority. One afternoon, as they finished repairing a broken fence, a familiar rider appeared on the horizon. John's heart skipped a beat, but this time, there was no fear. The rider approached slowly, tipping his hat respectfully as he drew near. "Morningstar," he said, his tone more measured than before. "I have come to ensure that all matters from your past are resolved. I see that you are well protected, and the children are safe." Morningstar nodded, calm and composed. "I am ready to face what must be done," she replied. "But I will not leave my children or this life behind. I am responsible for them, and I have the support I need." John placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You are not alone," he said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The rider studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well," he said. "Your courage and strength are clear. You may continue your life here, and I will ensure your family's legacy is respected and safe." Relief washed over John and Morningstar. The tension that had shadowed their days for so long began to lift. The knowledge that her past would no longer threaten their lives allowed them to breathe freely for the first time in years. They returned to their work on the ranch, their steps lighter, their hearts calmer, and their bonds stronger than ever. As the weeks passed, the ranch became a true sanctuary. Morningstar taught the children not only survival skills, but also the values of compassion, respect, and resilience. She shared stories of her heritage in ways that were appropriate for their age, helping them understand the strength and wisdom of their lineage without instilling fear. John watched her with admiration, realizing that her influence was shaping the children into thoughtful, capable, and confident individuals. Evenings were moments of quiet reflection and togetherness. The family would sit by the fire, sharing meals, stories, and laughter. John found himself opening his heart more than he had in years, allowing himself to hope and dream again. Morningstar's presence had healed old wounds he had thought would never close, and her courage inspired him to embrace the future with optimism. One day, as the sun set in a blaze of gold and orange across the plains, John and Morningstar walked together to the edge of the property. The children ran ahead, playing among the wildflowers, their laughter filling the air. John took Morningstar's hand gently, feeling the warmth and reassurance of her touch. "You've changed everything," he said softly. "Not just for me, but for all of us. The ranch, the children, our lives. It's better because of you." Morningstar smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light of the sun. "We changed each other," she replied. "The storm brought us together, but it was our choices, our trust, and our courage that built this life." John felt a deep sense of gratitude and love. He had faced loss, loneliness, and uncertainty, but now he understood that life had more to offer than he had imagined. With Morningstar by his side, and the children thriving in their care, he knew that they had created something lasting, meaningful, and beautiful. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the ranch flourished. The land was productive, the animals healthy, and the family strong. John and Morningstar worked together seamlessly, their partnership built on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and deep affection. They faced challenges with courage, solved problems together, and celebrated small victories as a family. The children continued to grow, learning the ways of the land, the values of respect and compassion, and the importance of courage and responsibility. They laughed freely, explored confidently, and developed a sense of security and belonging that had been missing from their lives. John and Morningstar watched with pride, knowing that their efforts and guidance were shaping the next generation with love and care. Life was not without difficulties, but the family faced them together, their bond unbreakable. John realized that the storm that had brought them together was only the beginning. It had introduced them to each other, but it was their choices, their actions, and their commitment that had created a home, a family, and a future filled with hope. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple, John and Morningstar sat on the porch, watching the children play. They spoke quietly about the future, about their dreams and plans, and about the life they were building together. There was a sense of peace and fulfillment in their conversation, a recognition that they had overcome challenges, faced fears, and found strength in each other. "We've come a long way," John said, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "And we still have a long way to go, but I know we can face anything together." Morningstar nodded, her hand resting on his. "Together," she agreed. "No matter what comes, we face it as a family." The plains stretched out before them, endless and wild, yet filled with promise. The ranch had become more than a home. It was a sanctuary, a place of learning, love, and growth. John knew that their journey was far from over, but he also knew that they were prepared to face whatever the future held. Their lives were intertwined, their hearts united, and their bond stronger than any challenge they might encounter. As night fell, the family gathered around the fire inside the cabin. The children told stories of the day, their excitement and joy infectious. John and Morningstar listened, smiling and laughing, their hearts full. In that moment, they understood the true meaning of family, not just shared blood, but shared trust, care, and love. The storm that had once brought fear and uncertainty had transformed into a symbol of change, growth, and connection. It had led John to Morningstar and her children, and together they had created a life that was richer, fuller, and more meaningful than he could have ever imagined. In the quiet of the night, John reflected on the journey they had taken. He had faced loss and loneliness, yet life had given him a second chance, a family, love, and a home filled with laughter and hope. Morningstar's courage and resilience had been the catalyst, and together they had built a life that honored the past while embracing the future. As he watched the children sleep peacefully and Morningstar rest beside him, John felt a sense of completeness he had never known. The plains stretched endlessly around them, wild and beautiful, yet they no longer felt lonely. They were home, together, and ready to face whatever came next. And so, life continued on the ranch, full of work, laughter, learning, and love. The storm had brought them together, but it was their choices, courage, and trust that had turned a chance encounter into a lasting family. John, Morningstar, and the children faced the future with hope, strength, and the knowledge that they were stronger together than they could ever be apart. The plains remained vast and unpredictable, but within the walls of the ranch, there was safety, love, and belonging. And for John Walker, the widowed cowboy, the woman and her children had not only changed his life, they had saved it, giving him a reason to hope, dream, and live fully once more.